I recovered from not one but two eating disorders, and honestly the second one was much harder to recognise. If you're struggling with your relationship with food right now, or your relationship with your body, or if you've been in the process of recovery and somehow you've slipped back, then this video is for you. I want to share some really honest but practical things I learned across these two different eating disorders, and things that I genuinely wish I had known a lot sooner. I'm Dr. Lara Zibarras. I am a psychologist and an eating disorder recovery coach, and I help women heal their relationship with food and their bodies. But things obviously weren't always that way. Like a lot of women, my relationship with food started to go wrong when I started dieting at the age of 16. And I started dieting because I got some comments about my body, and I thought, you know what, let me go on a diet. I had seen all the women around me, aunts, etc., dieting, so it felt like a really obvious thing to do at the time. So I tried various magazines diets, I cut down on food, I basically just stopped eating so much. I lost some weight and I got lots of really positive comments, and that was the thing that kept me going, that kind of external validation. But then over the years I found that the dieting was spiraling into binging. So I'd go through phases of real restriction, then phases of binging, and then eventually that led to bulimia. So I struggled with bulimia for a few years in my late teens and early 20s, and then eventually I went to see someone about it. I got some really good help in my mid-20s, and then I had this period of relative food freedom, and actually honestly I thought that I had fixed my relationship with food. Now looking back on it, I can see that I was still sort of mentally restricting and still cutting back, and I would still do little fad things, but nothing particularly extreme. So there was no binging or bulimia anymore. And it was only really after I got pregnant in my early 30s that I started to really struggle again. I really struggled with my relationship with my body and how my body was changing and what those pregnancies were doing to my body. And then after the pregnancies, there's a real pressure on women. There's this whole kind of rhetoric around 9 months up, 9 months down, get your body back, and that kind of thing. So after my daughter was born, who's my youngest, I decided that was it. It was time to get my body back. And it was that actually that spiraled me into a real obsession around eating. Now, I was very sure that I was not going to do another diet because I knew what had happened to me in my late teens and early 20s. So I decided to quote unquote get healthy, and that's where I jumped on the sort of clean eating bandwagon, and I started to cut more and more foods out of my diet, all in the name of health. And again, got lots of positive comments, people saying to me, oh, you're so disciplined, how do you do it, and so on. So that then spiraled into what I now know was orthorexia, which is an unhealthy obsession with healthy eating. And honestly, it really affected all parts of my life, my social life, my mental health, and so on. And the problem is with orthorexia, it looks like you are being healthy. On the surface of it, it looked like I was taking a very healthy approach to eating. People called me disciplined and praised the way I was eating, but it was a very rigid, controlled, obsessive way of eating. And again, I recovered from that. Maybe recovery was slightly harder that time because there was quite a lot to unpick around my mindset of what I thought was healthy and what I thought was actually good for me. And then that led me on the path to becoming an eating disorder recovery coach, and now that's what I do, help women heal their relationship with food. Now looking back, these are 5 things that I learned that I wish I had known sooner. The very first thing is that diets are a terrible idea. Seriously, when you restrict food, when you eat too little of something, whether you are cutting down on calories or food groups, and I have done both, or you're following really rigid rules, there are 2 things that happen. From a biological perspective, when you restrict food, your brain basically interprets that as famine, and it does everything in its power to try and prevent you from starving during the famine. It doesn't know the difference between a diet or a restrictive eating plan and a famine. Your hunger hormones ramp up, your brain starts fixating on food, and you become absolutely preoccupied on eating. And that's not because you're lacking willpower, it's literally because your brain is trying to stop you from starving. And this is when binges can start. And in both periods of my disordered eating, binging was a common feature because of the restriction. But there's also a psychological part to diet. When you tell yourself that there's a whole host of foods that you can't eat, and that's often sugary foods or carb-based foods. The moment that you tell yourself those foods are off limit, you want them a lot more. This is something called the forbidden fruit effect. Literally, you tell yourself that you can't have something, and those are precisely the foods that you want to eat more of. That restriction creates that obsession. Those banned foods get put up on a pedestal. We fixate on them from a psychological perspective. And then the problem is when we eat those foods, because we have called them naughty or off limits, then we feel that extra layer of guilt and shame because we've gone and eaten all the foods we told ourselves we shouldn't. So if you've ever found yourself binging after a period of restriction, it's actually a really predictable result of that restriction. A quick side note here, if any of this is resonating with you, I have a free training called Binges to Balance. It goes into a bit more detail about this cycle and helps you find ways to escape that cycle. I've put the details in the description below. The second thing I've learnt is that both the diet and the wellness industries are designed to keep you stuck. Honestly, I've seen diet culture and wellness culture impact so many of the women that I work with. The diet industry, the weight loss industry, the wellness industry, they all have a financially vested interest in keeping you stuck. There's always something that you're aspiring to. You're not quite thin enough, you're not quite healthy enough, you're not quite this enough. And the more you feel like you are falling short, the more likely you're going to buy that next program, that next diet or healthy eating regime. They're both based on this idea that you need to aspire to this particular ideal. And because that particular ideal is virtually unattainable, you're always aspiring. If you lose a bit of weight on a diet or a healthy eating regime, there's always a little bit more to lose. So you're always made to feel that you're not quite there. And especially because diets don't work for the reasons that I just explained, it means that each time you go back to eating normally and maybe you gain a little bit of weight, then you feel like you failed and then you want to go back to the next diet. So that's that constant feeling like you're falling short, falling off the wagon, and needing to start the cycle over again. That's brilliant for the diet and the wellness industry because they're constantly able to sell you more product because you feel like you're constantly failing. The third thing I learned, and it took me such a long time to learn this, is that we are so much more than our bodies. The diet and the wellness world actually are designed to make us feel that the most important thing about us is our bodies. And so this kind of fixating on changing our bodies or that body obsession means that how we look becomes totally central to who we are. And this is everywhere in the culture, especially at the moment, this kind of fixating on changing our bodies. But we are so much more than our bodies. And if we really understood this as women, but also as humans, then there wouldn't be so much obsession with wanting to change how we look constantly. We are our relationships, our creativity, our passion, our interest, our curiosity, our ability to connect with people, like friendships and family. Those are the things that make us who we are. When I was deep in both of my eating disorders, so much of my mental bandwidth was taken up by obsessing over how I looked, but also what I was eating to change how I looked. And so I honestly wasn't able to do much else with my thinking because so much of that mental chatter, that mental space was taken up by thinking about food and my body. And honestly, when that mental chatter goes, we have so much more time for just other stuff in life. The fourth thing I learnt, and it took me again a really long time to learn this, is that food is neither good or bad, it's just food. I spent years moralising food, both during dieting phase and the orthorexia phase. I had categorised food into different camps. It was either good or bad, or healthy, unhealthy, clean, or toxic. And language like that can be really insidious to what it does to us, because if we end up eating food that is deemed bad, then we feel bad as a result. And then there's so much guilt and shame that comes with eating food that we have considered bad. Food doesn't have more morality per se. Yes, I totally agree that some food is more nutrient dense than others. That is undeniable. But whether it's good or bad is just doesn't need to be part of the way that we talk about food. And again, yes, we want to make sure that we're eating more nutrient dense food than other food, but food has so much more value than just fueling our bodies. It's about connection, it's about comfort, it's about culture. There's food that nourishes the body, but there's also food that nourishes the soul. And when we take away that good versus bad mentality, then it's much easier to eat a little bit of that less nutrient dense food, not feel bad about it, and then just get on with our day, because we're not beating ourselves up over the fact that we ate it. The big difference for me is that before, chocolate was deemed a really bad food, so I used to avoid it, but then when I did eat it, I'd eat loads of it, I'd binge on it, and then I'd feel really guilty as a result. Now, because food is neither good or bad for me, I have a little bit of chocolate every single day, but I can eat 2 squares of chocolate and I enjoy the taste, I really savour it, I eat it very slowly, and then I get on with my day, and it's not really a big deal. And that's the difference when we take away that good versus bad mentality. And then the final thing that I learned is that healing is not linear. And I think my journey is really proof of that. I went through the dieting, the binging, the bulimia, and then I had this period of semi-recovery. I would, now that I look back at it, consider it quasi-recovery, because I was sort of recovered to an extent, but not all the way. I certainly still viewed food as good versus bad. There were certain foods that I was trying to avoid or that I didn't really eat. So there was definitely some mental restriction going on. It was really only after the orthorexic phase I recovered completely. So if you've relapsed, or you feel like you are taking a few steps forward and a few steps back, please know that recovery isn't linear. It's not like you just get a little bit better. Often people find that their recovery looks a lot more like that. So the trajectory is going in the right direction, but you will feel like you are going 1 step back, 2 steps forward, and so on. So thank you so much for watching this. I hope you found that insight helpful and that it will help you on your recovery journey too. And like I said at the beginning, if you want to go a little bit deeper, my Binges to Balance free training is really helpful. 50 minutes to uncover and unpack a little bit about what's keeping you stuck at the moment, and then crucially how to move forward. The link is in the description below. And if you want to watch another video, I've shared another story of my recovery journey for you to take a look at. And if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and I will see you in the next video. Bye for now.